and I'm a PhD student based at UWS in Scotland. And sorry I couldn't make it all the way to Bristol today due to various travel problems. My PhD looks really at the interaction between teaching, research and public engagement in STEM subjects, and I'm looking from the perspective of Scottish lecturers. So in my session, I wanted to look at data walking, and I also wanted to look at how this fed into my own reflections and helped me to develop dialogue with interview participants. And it's quite interesting because touching on something Elise mentioned earlier about authenticity, public engagement relies a lot on that. And I think that autoethnography is a great way to develop this, and perhaps that's something that science academics don't always get up close and personal with. I chose to look at STEM subjects, particularly those referred to as STEM Panel B, which includes physics, chemistry, engineering and maths, mainly because I'd looked at a 2014 report on the REF returns, which showed that these disciplines had the lowest levels of reported case studies that actually mention public engagement. And crucially, they found that public impact can be hard to capture, and dissemination instead of dialogue miss that deeper impact. So I wanted to find out how Scottish scientists experience this and how it affects their own research and teaching. During the last 25 years, education's really increased its focuses on the links between teaching and research, but more recently, the impact of research and its reach in society beyond the ivory tower has brought focus on this triple nexus. And I wanted to find out if that really was actually happening for people. I used in my interviews an interpretive phenological analysis methodology, and I collected data views using interviews and autoethnographic writing, which was journaling and writing pieces and sharing them with people. I really wanted to examine the essence and the life world of those that I spoke to. So data walking, simply put, refers to the collection of observed data, interview data, or reflexive data whilst walking. And I use this method to record formative thoughts on my mobile phone whilst walking to reflect and feed into autoethnographic writing. And these pictures I'm sharing show some of my walks from all seasons in the Northwest Highlands of Scotland where I live. For me, it was a place and space to clear the head and to seek a different scene, and from the confined spaces of homeschooling and homeworking in a busy family home during the pandemic. On a practical level, data walking is shown to be an effective method to gather place-based data in the fields of anthropology, ethnography and geography, environmental science and architecture. But data walking for me was initially expedient during lockdowns because it was the only form of activity permitted within government guidelines. But as this process became more embedded into my daily life, I realized not only was it feeding my well-being, but it was also providing a very fertile space to reflect on my research work and my positionality. So walking itself is shown to support cognition, metacognition, and self-confidence. It can really equalize power relationships between researchers and research participants. And it became apparent in my own practice that embodied movement positively supported my reflective practice and critical thinking. Therefore, I formally adopted this method even after the lockdowns eased, and I continued to walk. So living up in the Northwest Highlands of Scotland, particularly in a pandemic, I had to conduct virtual research. And I found that during a global health crisis, virtual research really is a form of disembodiment. And arguably, I found that autoethnography really addressed this through some form of embodied reflexivity. I spoke to 10 participants, and sometimes I came away from a call wanting to reach out and check in with a colleague. Sometimes I felt a little bit distressed after I'd spoken to people because they shared with me some of the trials and tribulations they'd gone through. But remote research meant that wasn't always possible. So I started to write, and I shared my writing with the scientists whom I spoke to. And you can see some of their reactions here. At the start of the PhD, I feel like you're looking at a mountain, more so when you're in isolation and all around you are in isolation too. And I wanted to use autoethnography as a means to reflect on my own position, but also to reflect back findings with my participants and see if we were on the same page. The results were very positive, and this inspired me to keep going. As I walked each day up a small hill at the back of my house, the task of writing and reflecting on data seemed less mountainous. It brought to mind a popular film from the 90s, The Englishman Who Went Up a Hill and Came Down a Mountain. In this film, the star Hugh Grant played the role of an affable cartographer who was taken along with the pride and passion of a Welsh village to change the status of a local hill to a mountain by adding to its height. But in my case, I felt like I was scaling a mountain, but bit by bit, walk by walk, I found I was going up a mountain, but coming down a hill, as the study findings took shape and the task ahead seemed less onerous. My former teacher from the UHI Outer Hebrides, Professor Frank Rennie, used to remind me of a blunt sentence when it came to research. So what? Well, Hugh Grant got his girl and he got his mountain mapped, but where am I going with this? My findings illustrate that roaming outdoors has helped me to develop a framework to record and synthesize reflective writing. But what I also wanted to consider is, where can this go? Data walking may exclude those who cannot walk due to lack of access to the countryside or disability. There may be other forms of somatic embodied movement that are alternatives to walking. For example, my interview findings indicate that lecturers may exercise their right to roam when dancing, swimming, cycling, knitting, and even people watching. And overall, it appeared that these types of activity enable a space for people to engage with ideas and creative thought. So during my PhD, I've developed a range of autoethnographic pieces, including songs, stories, and poetry. And I'd like to finish with a poem that I wrote after interviewing a women participant. I resonated with the challenges myself that they faced as a woman, a caregiver, a worker. It's a reminder that one should exercise the right to roam, but also one should maintain boundaries. And this poem is called Finding My No. When I interviewed Iota C, I felt distressed. It was clearly visible as the video stream came online that she was suffering from physical ill health. Her matter-of-fact stoicism about her medical condition put me at ease to some extent, but I really didn't want to pressure her as it became clear that her workload, which she jokingly described as being 150% of contracted hours, is immense. Despite this, she felt it was all the better and more enjoyable when teaching her students. Iota C is a courageous, a so-called and so-felt foreigner living in post-Brexit Britain. At the intersections of academia and STEM, she is aware you need to work extra hard if you're a woman, if you're of colour, if you're of a different culture, or if you're LGBTQT+. It made me think about my positionality again. It made me re-examine my place of privilege to share Iota C's story, mindful of my intentionality. Does the academic community take this on board? I feel helpless as she unravels her story. But Iota C does want to speak out. She is an early career researcher, and whilst her shoulders are wide and strong to take on this burden, her role is precarious. She wants to find her no to unrealistic contractual demands, no to devising a system to measure the impact of public engagement, no to additional tax burdens for EU academics post-Brexit, no to gendered rhetoric that has no tangible outcomes for change. Finding my no. Finding out, researching, searching the half-lit ivory tower. Intersections contrast like chiaroscuro depending on your lens. Finding my real me beyond the walls of the convivial community, mutinous mycelium that spreads like a dangerous idea. Finding my no way out, set on a track, measured by metrics, reaching in from outside, authentically anchored. Thank you, and hopefully we'll have some Q&A after my session, but that's it from me now. Thanks for your time.